Hello, welcome back. In this lesson, we will discuss about resource locators. Selenium uses resource locators to find the exact element on a web page. In our previous lesson, Web Elements, we have used resource locator by name of the search text box. So we can see here when I do inspect, and we have used the name as the resource locator, and we haven't discussed about the resource locators at that point of time. Now we will see what are the various types of resource locators. Name is one of them, ID is one of them, and you can find by XPath and you can find by CSS. There are different ways to find an element on a web page. And of course, there is an order of preference, not a strict one, but if there is an ID available and that ID is unique in the web page, that would be the first choice. And same applies to the name. If the name is unique in that particular web page, then name would be the second preference. And most commonly in the recent times, the web pages are developed using some sort of JavaScript libraries. So it makes it harder to have a unique and consistent ID and name for UI elements. So XPath has been more frequently used than any other resource locators. We will start with ID and name, and then we will look into XPath. Let us do a quick recap on WebDriver, Web Element, and Resource Locator. So anything you do with the browser level is what the WebDriver does. So driver.get gets the URL for us, and driver.find finds the UI element for us, and driver.close will close the browser. These are the typical methods we use on a WebDriver. When it comes to Web Element is returned when you do a WebDriver.find element, and it returns as a web element, which can be a text box like this, and it can also be a search button and any kind of buttons, any of those UI elements you see on the web page. Those are web elements. Now the current lesson, which deals with resource locators. Resource locators are used by WebDriver to find an element. So if WebDriver wants to find an element to enter the testautomation.co in the search text box, it has to do driver.find element, and then basically we want to provide a parameter by what? By dot ID is one option. You can give the ID of this particular text box and 1213. Then it will return the web element text box. And if you want to find it by name, you can do by dot name q, right? So these are the options we have, and like I mentioned earlier, ID would be the first preference if the ID is available, but with one big clause: only if this ID is unique on this web page. If some other element has same ID 1213, and that may not be a good option to use an ID. Or if this ID is keep on changing when the page refreshes, or whenever the new application comes, they keep changing the IDs, then also it's not a good idea to use an ID. So two things again. One is when we have multiple elements with the same ID on the same page, not a good idea to use by ID. As a matter of fact, not a good idea to use a resource locator which finds multiple elements on the page. And number one, remember as duplication. If you have duplicate IDs on the same page, don't use it. And number two, if the ID kept on changing whenever you refresh the page or whenever the new build comes up, the ID changes, then it is a problem, right? The next time when you run your script, if the ID is different, you won't be able to find that text box. So then also not a good idea to use an ID. And again, the same principle with the by name. You apply the same principle. If the name is unique in the web page, use it. And if the name is consistently available, the same value with the page refreshes or when the new build comes, if the name is consistently the same, then you can use the name by name as your resource locator. What if these are not consistent? That's when we will look into the other options we have available. So one of the prominent one is by XPath. And also you opt for using XPath if there is no ID or if there is no name associated with certain input type or some element does not have any one of those. It doesn't have the ID and also it doesn't have the name, then you're left with the choice of using either by CSS or by XPath. So we will take a look at how to find an XPath, because XPath is not readily available as such like ID and name are available. We have to use Google Developer Tool. That's one way. You can also use Firebug and Firepath to get the XPaths. We will try to use the most reliable way to get the XPath, that is using Google Developer Tool. I should say Chrome Developer Tool. We will end this lesson and start on using Chrome Developer for resource locators in the next lesson. Thank you.